Welcome to week 10 of the 2025 challenge. My name is Sarah Merriweather, and I'm here with
Eric Moore.
Eric. So glad that you joined us today. Eric's one of our participants in the challenge.
Yep.
So he's filling in for Pastor Bruce while Pastor Bruce is still out recuperating. We really appreciate you joining. Last week I had my husband. This week I've got one of my friend and coworker's husbands. It's like the husband show or something. I don't know.
I guess, yeah.
I probably need to get another, maybe get a woman on here next time, but we'll figure it out. So anyway, thank you for being here. As always, our goal is going to be to kind of walk through the readings where we've been in the last week. I'm going to try to recap some things. There's some cool stuff that happened in this week's readings, and answer questions if you had them. In fact, there are some interesting questions as well this week. So that's where we're headed today. Again, week 10, we're going to be looking at days 64 to 70 in the plan. So let's begin with prayer today, Eric. Heavenly Father, we ask for you to really bless this time together, God, to open our hearts and our minds to the hearing of your word and to be present in this discussion today for those of us here and also for those of us watching. God, we just ask for your provision and your favor as we read your word this week. Amen. All right, Eric. So we're going to jump right on in with our recap and Q&A. We're going to start with day 64.
Which, can I say something?
Yeah.
I know there's 365 days in a year.
Uh-huh.
And I know it's a 49-week challenge.
Yes.
But how are we already on day 64?
It does. In fact, I actually had to do some math last night because I'm like, I feel like this is like we're getting to a number. We're not that far off from being 25% of the way done.
I know. The little bar on the app is starting to fill up.
Yeah.
We're getting some activity there.
It's good. And you have actually been almost like a week ahead. Have you kept up with that, or did you slide back a little bit?
So I am on a week ahead. I did slide for 2 days. I wasn't feeling very well, but I ended up catching up because I really enjoy that the Sundays are lined up so perfectly to give you that kind of that one verse. You get some reflection.
Yeah.
We've got a busy day with Sunday, and we're doing a lot of things, and so I like that that's lined up that way.
Well, I'm so glad. The true confession time here on the recap video, that was by accident. That it lined up on Sundays. Yeah. We didn't look ahead far enough to even know that was how it worked, but we're going to own it. Like, yes, that was the plan. But so if you've watched this now, you know the secret. But if you haven't, maybe you just think we were really good at planning.
Yeah. And that's the cool part about this plan is you can customize it. And if you need that day on a specific day of the week to line up, just make it that way.
Yeah.
Just line it up so you get that little bit of a shorter day, that little bit of reflection on the day that works for you. Sundays just work for me, for the family. So I am a week ahead still. But again, that's to plan for that vacation like we talked about at the beginning. It's 49 weeks instead of 52 to plan for a vacation.
I love it. I mean, it gives you a little bit, if you get behind, you can be like, this is still doable.
Yes.
And I haven't felt like any day's reading has been really too much,
Maybe not in the length. There are a few moments where it's a lot for my brain.
Okay.
But you're right.
That's
From
fair.
a length standpoint, it is easy to kind of bite off, and it's something to commit to. And I kind of had to change some of my routine. And so at first it started off with the first 21 days, right? It takes 21 days to create a new habit. Started off that way of like, I'm going to read every single day to create this habit. But then it was like, well, now I just love this habit of getting up. I get up at 5 a.m. before the kids get up, so that I can have my me time, my God time, and then now it's just I don't want to skip that part of my day, so it just became part of it.
I love it. I mean, that was the goal of this. The goal wasn't, that everybody gets a trophy at the end because we've read through the Bible in the year. The hope was that we all grow in our biblical literacy, but more importantly, that we start patterns if we need to. Create
the right habit. Exactly.
Because
100%.
Discipleship is a discipline. It takes practice. You can't just hope that I read more of the Bible. I think you really have to be intentional about it.
Yeah. And I know this is a side note, but I just got done talking to you.
That's what we do here. Our side notes. Yeah.
The Dad Tired podcast. Yeah. Not specifically the podcast, but the book titled Dad Tired, which is about the podcast, where he talks about how it does take work and it does take discipline to disciple your children, to disciple those around you, and it is intentional. So
you have to be.
If it doesn't take a little bit of work, then it's probably not right. And now I tell you, it's not work anymore. So
Well, that's good to hear.
Again, let's see when I, am sick and I fall off the rails or vacation, if I can get back on it. But at this point, I'm enjoying where I'm at, and I don't look at if I'm ahead or not. I'm just reading.
Good, good. Well, so glad that you're part of it and enjoying it. I've enjoyed chatting with you about it offline as well. So, all right. So we do begin day 64 here.
Okay.
We're going to, on this day, we read John chapter 7, 1 Samuel 16, Psalm 114, and Psalm 129. My takeaway from this in the Gospel of John, chapter 7, was that, we were laughing about this earlier. You and I share, our families, I think, a similar sense of humor, at least you and Rob, mostly. And I fall in there in some of that. And I do love a good Will Ferrell movie.
Yeah.
And so, I was trying to kind of slide in some things here for you today, but this I think would have done even if you hadn't been here, because as I was reading through this passage, I'm thinking to myself, it is really clear to me that Jesus really does not like the crowds.
Mm-hmm.
He does not that he's annoyed by them, but, maybe not the most extroverted guy. Jesus, it's possible.
Yeah.
And, I had to laugh because I was like, so much for Cal Naughton Jr. in Talladega Nights, who says, but my Jesus likes to party, right? Like, I don't know that our Jesus likes to party.
I don't know that maybe he doesn't like to party, but maybe he doesn't like planned parties.
Oh,
like
maybe.
He likes the impromptu parties.
Yeah.
But I think he also likes, he's intentional about it. And so if the intention of a certain gathering isn't for him, he's going to kind of like, listen, bros, you go take off, you do your thing. I'm going to hang back. By the way, I'm going to go off and do my own thing. And I'm going to sneak there. I think there's a little bit of it's not his time to necessarily get caught.
Yes.
Right.
We're going to chat
I might
a
be
little
getting
bit about
ahead of
that.
myself.
No,
but you get my
it's
point.
okay. Yeah.
So I think he does like to, in my brain is he does like to party, but it's almost like, it's got to be my party, it's got to be my terms and all that. So
a Jesus kind of party, unless his mom asks him to turn, water into wine, right?
Yeah. He doesn't want to be forced to do anything, please. Yeah.
But this one was interesting to me because his own brothers, we're not talking about like the disciples here necessarily, like his fam did not believe in him. They actually wanted him to prove himself to the crowds. And so in John chapter 7, verse 4, one of them says, I don't think they're named in there, says, no one who wants to become a public figure acts in secret. It's like they're giving him a hard time. Like, Jesus, nobody who wants to be a public figure is going to act like this dude.
Yeah.
And they're like, since you're doing these things, you need to show yourself to the world.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm paraphrasing, but that's what they say there in John 7:4. And then Jesus gives this weird response, which you kind of alluded to, which is, well, my time's not yet here. And so he then goes on to say, well, the world hates me because I testify that its works are evil. Well, probably be a good reason.
Probably not going to be liked very much for that.
Probably not. Yeah. But then I put this question, but then he actually does.
Correct.
Change his mind. And he goes to the festival in secret. And so then I ask, well, maybe he really does like to party.
Tony, he loves to party. It's just not somebody else's party. It's got to be on his own terms. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So he goes and he teaches at the temple during the festival. And, I feel like I probably put a lot of things on Jesus when I was reading this passage that maybe weren't real, but I like to try to put Jesus in real life. Did you ever do group projects at school?
I think I know where this is going. Yes, I did.
Okay.
And I loved group projects. And you're probably going to say that you didn't like them?
Well, I'm going to ask you, what kind of member of the group were you, Eric?
As soon as we got a sign that we got a group project, I knew it was going to be done, and I knew that it was going to be done well, and that's because I don't know, when I would be just given a project of my own, I was like, maybe this is going to get done, maybe it's not. But when I'm with a group, I have people to rely on. I don't have to do it all or part of it or any of it.
I knew it. I knew that was going to be it. And, I'm not always a fan of group projects. I have a little bit of a stubborn leadership streak. I know that would be shocking.
Yeah, shocking.
And I would get into a group project and be like, oh my gosh, you guys are really messing this up. Just let me do it. Just let me do it.
Yeah.
And
I would be messing it up just so we're all the same.
I'm better now. Okay. I mean, but this is what I fight even as an adult, is that urge to like, just fix it.
Yeah.
And so I kind of imagine Jesus here as going, I didn't really want to go to the festival. Oh my gosh, I cannot really sit around and watch these people keep screwing it up.
That's such a good take. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm going to have to go, have something to say to them. And so he does. And then it starts, we get this like setup, right? It's where John kind of builds, and we're going to get to that in a later day this week, but it's where John begins to build. There then is this division over who Jesus is, right? Is he a prophet? Is he the Messiah? Is he crazy? Like, is he none of it? And then there's unbelief from the Jewish leaders. And so the Gospel of John is just a curious departure from Matthew, Mark, and Luke, because they really are into building up the story, in the Gospel of John, the writer of John. So anyway, that's John. Any more thoughts on that reading from John?
Well, I took it as, again, he likes to party. He likes to be on his own terms, and he didn't want the fanfare. He knew, again, his brothers just got done talking about how, public figure acts in secret. Like, they're talking him up. Like, we got to go and we got to talk you up. And so, in my mind, Jesus doesn't want that fanfare. He just simply wants to go in secret. So, not that he lied. Maybe he did have a change of heart or something like that, but... He needed to go on his own terms, secretly go there, attack it.
Well, we've talked about this on the recap, and it's a theme through the Bible that, Jesus is so concerned with the state of our heart, right? With the reasons why we're doing the things. And so, for him to be there turning the world upside down, he had to be like, you guys, like, you're my own family.
Correct.
This isn't even my goal. I'm not trying to become a public figure.
Yes.
I'm the Son of God.
Yes.
Like there is a difference there. And so
almost like it's not him saying, I'm not going there. He didn't say that. He said, I'm not going with you there. You know what I mean?
I do. Yeah.
Like,
and then it, sneaks in the back. So it's just, there are just some curious passages for me that, when we read through the Bible like this, I find it difficult to really, stop. And this might be one of those chapters that you could spend months on.
Probably.
Digging into some of the details of actually almost, frankly, anything in the Gospels. I think you could do that. There's just so much, richness there. So anyhow, so that's the setup in John 7. We're going to move through John in later days in this week. So we'll come back to it a little bit. Not to breeze over it, because this is kind of a big deal, but in 1 Samuel 16, we actually see the time when Samuel anoints David. And the interesting setup there is we've got some more brothers. And they're not totally different to how Jesus's brothers were with him, except that they were like, no way does he want the shepherd boy.
Yeah, he doesn't want we left him out in the field because we knew you wouldn't be interested.
Right. And they're like, isn't there another somewhere? I always just find it just kind of a fascinating part, that once again, here's a story in the Bible of God using the least, the low, the broken, the least expected, and then raises them up to be, in this case, greatest of all, at that time, right? And we see the same thing with Jesus. So that's a great story, and one that I always, not that I forget is there, but we always think of like King David, and David is the psalmist, and David, as Pastor Bruce likes to call him, the scumbag, because he did some stuff. But I often forget about David as being like the leftover brother in the field.
Yeah.
So
why are we all so afraid of being the leftover brother?
Well, I think when we chase worldliness instead of godliness, the worldliness tells us you don't want to be the leftover brother in the field.
100%.
You got to be like Jesus's brothers, right? You got to be the public figure. Go do the things.
Yeah, any of us would have said, "Oh, this party could potentially be about me. I got to go take that. I got to do that."
Right.
I'm really interested in that.
Right. The kind of service that Jesus demonstrates for us, which is that service of humility where, the low are brought to the highest, places. And we're going to be looking at that actually in worship next week when we kind of dig into the Beatitudes as part of Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah.
And it's just one of the struggles, I think, for Christianity, because it is easy to understand our salvation. It's easy to become a follower of Jesus. But these things are hard.
They are.
I mean, they're hard concepts to follow. So we did have a participant say on this day that, when Samuel went to see Jesse's son, she loves what God said to him, that people judge by the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart, and, shares, rightly so, that it is most important that our heart is right with the Lord.
And that's exactly what I was going after, right?
Yeah.
Like, why is that so important to us? And it's not a question that you and I are going to answer here, but I think it constantly is brought up, and I think that God constantly tells us, well, that's wrong, and we do need to be looking at the heart, and here's why, and here's how I did it, right?
Right. But it doesn't come naturally.
It doesn't.
Grace, mercy, thank goodness for those.
Right?
Right? It's why we need a Savior, ultimately.
100%.
So you teased me earlier that our first days usually go long. Here we were, day 64. We spent a while on that, but that's okay. We're going to move on to day 65. You thought we were just going to breeze through. Little did you know, Eric.
Here we go. I gotta sit like Rob.
I love it.
Watch last week's video.
Yeah, delicious dish if you want to check that one out. They have a commercial now too, which is funny. Have you seen that? It's like a Capital One commercial, and they're sitting in the Capital One, the delicious dish on SNL. If you have no idea, yeah, it's worth seeing. Yeah. Okay, on track. Day 65. Okay. So we looked on day 65 at John chapter 8, Exodus 5 and 6. Deuteronomy 17 and 2 Chronicles 18. So that's where we spent this day. I got to get my papers here a little bit.
Well, while you're getting your papers, I'm sorry, but John 8, one of my favorite Jesus interactions. Absolute.
Okay, good. Is it mine too? Yeah.
Is it?
I think it might be, because that's what I wrote in my notes here.
I just love the way he acts as they're challenging him. So, all right, continue. Sorry, go ahead.
Tell me about why do you love it?
No, I want you to start. Okay, listen. I love...
Go ahead.
I love when they're constantly asking him to, hey, what are we going to do about this woman? She committed adultery. Oh, what do you say about that? Right? They're really challenging him.
Yeah.
And he's just... in my mind, he's just playing in the dirt.
That's exactly what I said. I said, I don't know if you saw the notes, but I literally wrote, I love the story of Jesus where he plays in the dirt while people decide who's going to stone the woman caught in adultery. And then, he just sits there and plays in the dirt. I love it.
Even after he finally responds to them, what does it say? It literally says he goes back to playing in the dirt while they wait to go ahead and figure out, all right, and if you haven't sinned, you go ahead and you throw the first stone.
He's just like,
I'll wait. That's his I'll wait statement.
I'll wait.
And then he looks back up. Everyone's gone. And he goes, well, did anyone throw a stone at you? And she effectively says, nope. And he goes, well, I won't either. So you're forgiven. Oh,
okie dokie.
I love it. And but I think it does speak more than just the comedy of it, right? Like,
yeah.
If you really stop and you think about, okay, so who hasn't sinned? Go ahead and raise your hand. Let's go ahead and let's figure this out.
I'll wait.
Right? Wow. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's a perfect call out. It's exactly where I was headed. An interesting thing I just wanted to note here as I was reading through this, and it caught my mind because I love weird little stuff like this in the Bible, that this story actually, which is encapsulated in John 7:53 through 8:11, it actually begins like John 7:53 is the very end of John 7, and there's half a sentence there, and then it continues. The note in at least the NIV that I was reading said it's not actually included in the earliest manuscripts, and instead is placed, quote, wholly or in part. That's or WHOLLY, wholly or in part after a different part of John 7, or all the way to John 21, which is after the crucifixion of Jesus, which happens, I think, in like chapter 19 of John. So that seems like a weird spot for it to me.
Yeah.
And then, and so I need to figure out, I didn't go and really look at that, but that was interesting.
Yeah.
Or it's found in Luke. And so, which is a completely different, writing style. And
completely different.
And I have to confess, this feels way more narrative. It feels more like the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, than it feels like John.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
So I'm like, okay. So I don't have any explanation for this. I want to look into it more. It's something that piqued my interest. I love facts like this because I'm kind of a Bible nerd in that way. I like to explore things like that. So that's just there. If that interests you as well, go sort it out for you.
I saw that note at the bottom of my Bible and didn't follow that rabbit trail.
It's okay. So. You can't follow them all. Right?
But that's why we have you.
But that would be my encouragement while you're reading the Bible. Yeah. If you feel a nudge to like go down a weird path.
There are times. Yeah.
Just do it. Right? Yeah. Because God is usually waiting there for you somewhere with a message. It has been my experience. So, but let's get back to the story before we move forward, because what do we think he was writing in the dirt? Like, do you think was it a doodle, or like, was it something? Like, was he writing something to them that they were like, oh.
And does that change our story? Does that change our perception of it? Because if he's just doodling, that means something completely different in my mind. And that's what I picture. I'll be honest. I picture him just like busy, like doodling.
Yeah, like drawing a flower in
absolutely
the dirt.
Nothing. Like something that absolutely shows what you're asking me is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But if he's writing something even profound.
Yeah.
That changes almost the kind of interaction between the two of them, or him and...
Well, we see examples, particularly in John, where we want to understand like the supernaturalness of Jesus. That's kind of where the Gospel of John goes. But even in the Synoptic Gospels, they talk a lot about times where they'll say, like as an aside, well, Jesus knew what the person was thinking.
Yeah.
And so it makes me wonder, like, was he writing the sins of the people in the dirt?
Oh, see, that's deep.
Right? Yeah. I mean, like, what if, what if he was like,
yeah,
that's you.
Steve last Tuesday stole a scone from the farmer's market, right? Like,
right. I mean,
I don't know.
That would make you walk away.
That's deep. I mean, absolutely. Yeah.
And so, I mean, it could be anything from, I don't know that we know. And I have to feel like if it was actually a message that maybe that would have been included in the story.
I don't know. It wasn't included originally.
Yeah. So I'm going to spend a little more time on this because I like the story a lot.
But see how different kind of our thoughts went there. Yeah. It's very interesting.
I've always been of the doodle camp, though, to be fair.
Have you? Okay.
That's where I've usually...
I don't feel so
alone. No. I always just sort of thought he was just kind of just playing in the dirt. Like, well, we have kids that play baseball. Mine are older now. They don't do this, thankfully, anymore. But
in
the T-ball years, there were definitely times where we had to like go pick a child up out of the infield because they were sitting there playing in the dirt. And so that's, I think, where my mind has usually gone on this passage. It's just, he's just kind of just hanging out.
Along those same lines, that's why I think my mind goes there, because not to say that wasn't an important thing for us to learn, but like so small for him. Like he's not interested in what you're saying because he already knew what you were going to ask. He already knew what the answer was.
Yeah.
That he's quite literally, not to say bored, but like he's bored of watching the baseball game that's not being hinted to him, right?
Bored.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
We see it over and over where Jesus is basically like, oh my gosh, I've told you already. Yeah. So I think I do probably stay in the doodling camp, but I like to throw a little thought provocation in there. You just never know.
100%. Yeah.
So, of course, this is followed then by an immediate dispute of over who Jesus is. Right? That's what follows here in John chapter 8. Even though he continues to tell them. Even in this chapter, he says, but I am the light of the world. And they're like, are you sure? I
don't believe you.
Doesn't sound right. So, again, John building the story for us here. Now, we jump over to the Exodus readings for this day. And so I just wanted to kind of share this because I really am a fan of this plan. I believe you are as well. We've talked about this. But I do not necessarily like how we are reading specifically the book of Exodus
Yes.
It has been a challenge for me. Job has been another one, actually, where we're jumping
Job is one that I would
storylines.
normally appreciate more than I am through this plan, 100%, because I'm not getting
Those are two kind of
the
narrative
narrative.
pieces that it's hard to catch up where you are. And so I understand, because we're looking for the connections, but this is one where I would probably encourage you, read the plan and keep up with it, because there are reasons, there are connections there.
Yeah.
But this might be one, if you've got some extra time, like on that Sunday, go through and read the whole book of Exodus. It's not a terrifically long read. I mean, I think you could do it in a couple of hours, probably.
Yeah, and
Maybe less.
I hate to give a plug to the YouVersion app, but there probably is a plan for it, and you can add another one. And
Please
I've done
give
that
a
couple
plug.
times.
Yes,
but
we love the YouVersion app.
You can search for other plans, and you could find a plan that's Exodus for 3 days, Exodus for 5 days, Exodus for 7 days, and it'll break it down for you.
Yeah.
And so you could even find something like that if you find a space that you want to learn more about.
You mean we could do extra Bible reading?
Yes.
Wow. All right. Who knew?
But I was telling you earlier, I've done 2 and I'm on a 3rd right now.
Yeah.
And they're just, you can kind of hit sample and then look to see if that one's going to add a ton of time. They're quick and easy. So.
Yeah. Or just open it up and read it.
Or just open it up and read it if you have time.
That's a possibility too.
100%.
But I really would encourage you to do it, because you can go back and make the connections, but if you are unfamiliar with the story from start to finish in the book of Exodus, this is going to get, I think, a bit confusing.
It
and
is.
You're going to miss some of the really important narratives that are in there. So anyway, we get to this place where here we are. Pharaoh doesn't want to, free the Israelites. And in fact, because he's so mad that essentially Moses even asked the question, he decides to make it harder for them to make bricks, and he takes away their supply of straw.
Take the straw away.
Right? Yeah, so, just what a jerk.
But still expect the same amount, right?
Even more, I feel like.
And then he drove him further. At first he said like the same, but then he asked for more. Yeah.
Just not a good dude, setting that up. And then in chapter 6, we see that God promises deliverance, but and this is why I think it's important to read the whole book of Exodus. We know this actually takes a while. It takes a while for Pharaoh alone to deliver them from slavery, to allow that to happen. And questionably, I mean, he does, but still kind of doesn't at that point. Reluctant, I would say. And then they wander 40 years in the wilderness.
And they're really excited about that, by the way.
Really excited. So there's a lot that's happening here. Yeah. And so, here in chapter 6, God promises deliverance. Again, we know it takes a while. So the question I thought we could chat about for a moment is, what do we do? Have you ever experienced a time when God promises something and you believe it? You believe the promise is clear, but that return is not immediate, or maybe not like even imaginable. You ever had that experience in your life?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to but I struggle with that when you're like, I believe this promise, but do I?
Yeah. Well, to your point, it's around the timing too. Like there's been, just to get personal, I was stuck in a job at one point. I thought there's no way out of this, and I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I have to provide for my family. But it was taking every every waking moment of my life. And I thought, how am I getting out of this? How am I getting out of this? There's no way out. And it just kept going. And it was kind of like that promise of like, God will always provide, God will always be there. But I wasn't trusting enough in him. Right. And maybe I kept grinding and I don't know what the answer was, but bottom line is he eventually was able to get me out of that situation.
But do you ever wonder sometimes, like, were you in it longer than you should have been?
That's what I'm trying to say. Like, I almost wasn't listening, and I could have trusted more. I wasn't trusting, but I said I was trusting, right?
Yeah, it's like
100%.
Like we had this joke, Pastor Bruce and I were talking, I think on the podcast, I don't think it was on here, a few weeks back, where I had seen a Facebook reel, Instagram reel, where it was somebody going, Jesus, take the wheel. And, but they were treating it like when you're driving with somebody in the car. My guess is you're usually the driver. So this is probably Tara saying this to you. And it's usually me saying it to Rob when we're in the car. But is, like, hey, but that was your exit over there.
I never miss an exit.
You're like afraid to say anything. And so this person was sort of equating, well, Jesus, yeah, it's fine. Go ahead and take the wheel. And then be like, oh, wait, what? I mean, but like the speed limit's 55, like, can we go a little faster?
100%. We're not getting there quick enough.
Jesus, that was our exit back there. And
so we're almost like the backseat driver or the co-pilot.
100%.
But I don't know. In my mind, I was the driver, but I wouldn't allow him to be the driver. So I was trying to like, in your situation, it'd be like you just like, all right, move over, Rob, I got this, and trying to like climb over him and hop in the seat. And that was me. I was trying to like force myself into that.
Well, like taking over the group projects, right? We've come full circle, but it's I think that probably is in many ways our human tendency is to go, okay, well, I don't ever question, and I've had some things in my life that I know God has promised. I've seen some of those come to fruition, and I'm still waiting on others. And the ones I'm waiting on, it's always easy in hindsight to be like, oh yes, look how God was faithful and worked, and it all came together in the end. The ones I'm waiting on, and I go, you get like the Israelites in the middle of the wilderness and go, yeah, this doesn't. Are we sure God said that?
I think I took a wrong turn.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I was better back there.
Way better back there.
Yep.
They wanted to go back to slavery.
They were like, I'm done. I'm going back. 100%.
We're better back there. So, I think the lesson really we can take from this today, always in our lives, is there are going to be times where God is going to deliver a full-on promise, like on a platter. Like, here you are. Here's what it's going to look like. And then I feel like might be silent for a while. You're going to see nothing happen.
Yeah.
It's almost just like a back away. And I've never determined if that's a test of our faith or what exactly it is. I know it is definitely a challenge to surrender the outcomes, but it's, I think, sometimes harder when you know where you're going. It's the trusting how to get there, because we think, my plan looks like step 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, and then promise.
Yeah.
And God's plan might look like, I'm going to take you to step 3 and then to step 48 over here, and then we're going to take a few steps back, and then we're right.
Yeah.
We're going to swim through a lake. And
well, let's talk.
It's weird.
So let's connect it back about Jesus's brothers.
Yeah.
Who said, you got to come to this party and put yourself on stage to be that public image. And he said, not yet.
Yeah. Look at
How many
you
times
going
did he
deep
say,
today?
It's not my time yet.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he escaped getting arrested or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit there, but
yeah, no, always interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
We were trying to take that drive. Others around him, I don't know.
That's an interesting one. I don't think I've ever really thought about the amount of times that Jesus says, it's not my time yet.
It's not time yet.
As sort of an example for us. Hey, you know what, guys? Like, sometimes you just got to be patient.
Because we wanted him to be our king, right?
Right.
That's what we thought.
Right.
And he said, that's not my time. Also because you're not getting it yet. So.
Yeah. Also that. Still aren't. Thousands of years later.
100%,
Here we are.
Yeah.
Okay. So I actually love the book of Exodus. It's probably the other reason I would encourage you to go read through it. It's just a cool narrative. I mean, there's just so much stuff in there. Just so much stuff. I mean, the plagues are kind of amazing. It's just a lot of rich Bible stuff in Exodus. So, all right. We did have a participant say about this that, the kings only wanted to believe the prophets who told them that they could win the war instead of listening to the one who spoke the truth from God. And this was from the story, I believe, that happened in 2 Chronicles on this day's reading. And, so here we have a king that says, even though he was disguised and not recognized as king of Israel, he was killed by a, quote, random arrow. So we're not going to talk a whole lot about this today. It's kind of an odd story, but
it is an odd story, but it's a good story.
Good one.
Yeah.
But this participant asked, how often do you think we ask, and then we ask again until we get the answer we want to hear instead of actually seeking God's will? And so I think the question for us here, really for pondering, is, can we get in our own way?
Yes.
This is kind of where you just
exactly where we were.
And do you think sometimes God sends random arrows? Because
Oh.
what is saddest to me in this story is that he doesn't die immediately. He gets hit with this random arrow in between like his armor,
Uh-huh.
and they
Yep.
prop him up on the
Mhm.
chariot, and he watches the enemies just fight all day, and then he dies at sunset.
Mm-hmm.
It's like cinematic and sad,
And then a little intense, yeah.
a little intense. And so I'm not suggesting that God wants us to suffer, but do you think sometimes, we get in our own way, and because we're not following God's will, we put ourselves in harm's way that God never intended for us?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
a tough one. That's my thought today.
There's so much more, but we got to keep going. There's so much more I want to dive into that one, because that one is a whole interesting story. He didn't believe, or he believed that all of the prophets and everyone around him, like, oh yeah, go to war. And basically, he searches for someone who's going to tell him, who ends up telling him, like, you shouldn't do that, but you were also told to be lied to, and yada, yada, yada. So
it's complex.
There's a whole complex thing there, but I mean, I think it ends of God's will happening. I think that's the highest level. Yeah. And he was trying to basically continue to hear that God's will was going to work out wonderfully exactly how he wanted it to be.
Right.
And when he was told how it would actually end up, he didn't love that answer and still continued to trudge through
right.
it. So.
Pastor Bruce and I were talking, I think, on our podcast a few weeks ago about the fact that we always say, we want to follow God's will, and we believe that God will do the right thing. I do believe that, and I do want to follow God's will.
Yeah.
But his challenging question to me was, but what if God's right thing isn't what you think it is? Are you still able to follow? Do you still want to follow a God whose right thing might not match up with your right thing? My answer is yes, because the alternative is awful. But those are challenges for us. We've got to wrestle with those things. Do we say, God's will, we believe that God wants our good, but that's a human definition.
Yeah.
Could be very different from a spiritual one.
And none of that makes those random arrows easier to deal with.
Absolutely not.
Until you're through it. Until you've healed from the arrow.
Yeah. Or in this poor guy's case, you've just got to literally sit there and watch your mistakes.
Watch them happen.
With an arrow sticking out of your side. So don't go there, friends.
No.
Don't do I think the lesson in all of this, actually, on this whole day is, how do we do a better job submitting and surrendering to God's will? And those are really difficult things, I think, for us in our culture today. We're not like, we don't hype up obedience in today's culture.
We do, but maybe to the wrong things. But that's a whole another discussion.
Now, friends, we're getting deep. All right, that's for the after party today. We'll chat about that later. But
later.
All right. Let's move on, Eric. We're gonna dig into day 66. Just some notes here. We're mostly gonna talk in this little bit here about John and Proverbs, but we read from John chapter 9, 2 Kings 14, Job 21, Psalm 66, and Proverbs 15. So in John, we see Jesus doing more stuff and the Pharisees getting more upset about it. My note here was that, like, the storyline is growing. If you were watching a movie about the Gospel of John, it would be that, they're building this kind of storyline up, that John kind of paints the picture for us so that the crucifixion of Jesus that comes later does not actually seem like a surprise by the time we get there. Not that we're, we still don't want it to happen as we read that, but you go, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense to me. They've been chasing him down since John chapter 1, basically. And so, I don't know. What were your thoughts on your John readings for this day?
Oh, I love that he said, listen, I was sent here literally to bring sight to the blind. And the Pharisees like, what are you trying to say, that we're blind?
He's like,
yeah, I am. So I did. I wrote that down in my journal here, that I really appreciated that part. But anyways, because then he says, like, but you remain guilty because you claim you can see.
Well,
right?
that's the theme we see with the Pharisees a lot, is that they're so blind that they think that what they're doing is right.
They're so blind that they're like, but I do see, right? So I appreciated that he just straight up called them out. So that's what I wrote down.
I would
as one of my
say
other
that
notes.
what the Pharisees are lacking the most of might be some personal reflection. You work in HR.
Yeah.
What would you write? How would you deal with the Pharisees here, Eric? What would you do? How would you help them get better? Or are they just not fitting the team culture at this point?
Well, I do a lot of empathy too.
Okay.
So I do a lot of what would you do in this situation, right? Like, tell me about yourself. Like, what if you were the opposite here? What if you were being judged? What if you were the, basically what Jesus does around.
Yeah, but they're not interested in that.
So I mean,
you're just going to offboard them at this point.
I'm pretty much gonna. I don't even know if they'd get a severance package at this point. Yeah,
that seems fair.
But I think it was last week or the week before you specifically talked about how there's a little bit of empathy for them as well, and if we were in that kind of situation. So I don't know. So I also throw.
This plan has forced me to really consider that, whereas before it seems so cut and dry when you're just like reading the Gospels.
Easy, yeah.
And you're like, these guys are terrible.
They don't know what they're doing. They're clearly blind.
Yeah, clearly blind. And then it was my own self-reflection to go, well, I really like to follow the rules.
Right?
I do. I mean, I was the kid in school that, if I got in trouble for talking, my gosh, but I would be upset about that for weeks and not want to go back to that class because a teacher told me to stop talking, which was probably a passing part of their day. Mm-hmm. They had no recollection of. But for me, it was like, oh no, no, I didn't follow the rules. I didn't mean to. And so I'm not. It's really hard for me to sit here and go, oh, I'd be 100% on the side of Jesus.
So now
I want to be.
Yeah. Well, and so I think that's why maybe I wrote this down and was thinking about that after watching your video. But if you think about it, that would be you as a rule follower. Jesus just came up to you and said, you are so blind.
I know. I'd be like, I am.
Right? And you're like, but I've been following everything. What are you even talking about?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Heavy.
It's easy when we read the Gospels to be like, oh, I'm for sure one of those disciples sitting around.
Easy.
And I would never be Judas, or I would never doubt like Thomas. I think we might.
Yeah.
I think we might deny Jesus like Peter did.
Yeah.
I think, it's a challenge. So, okay, lots of thinking in the Gospel of John
this
week.
Quit fishing and follow Jesus, but I don't know that any of us would be able to easily do that.
Right. It's Rob's big question. That's what he even chatted about last week was why would you do that? It doesn't make logical sense. Sure does not.
Wow. Okay.
So, all right.
But see, here we go.
Proverbs 15. Okay. So many good things in here. We once played a game on our podcast that we called it Proverbs or Fortune Cookie.
Yes.
And Pastor Bruce got most of them wrong, actually. He thought, most of the Proverbs are fortune cookies and vice versa. And so I said, we've joked. It's like the fortune cookie of the Bible. And in this chapter, we're covering how we speak. We're covering money. We're covering sacrifice. We're covering the condition of our heart. We're covering tempers and discipline.
Mm-hmm.
But I added my favorite weird one here because it's just weird. And that was this quote from Proverbs 15:17. It says, better a small serving of vegetables with love than a fattened calf with hatred.
What's the spoonful of sugar helps the medicine? An apple a day keeps the doctor away.
I just thought, I was like, even the Bible doesn't love their vegetables. I don't know why that one. Better a small serving of vegetables with love than a fattened calf with hatred. It makes sense, I guess. But I don't know why that one just caught me. It's kind of funny and weird. So
I like it.
Proverbs is always good for a little weirdness there.
I think our entire theme changed for today to eat your vegetables.
Yeah.
There we go.
It's probably easier to eat your vegetables than to actually follow Jesus sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, maybe
Yeah.
that's our advice for the day.
But that is not another rule that you have to follow, Sarah.
It
We are
is
not.
not.
We're not trying to be blind here.
It is not. We had a participant say, from Proverbs here, that a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. That was, again, for Proverbs 15. I don't know exactly what verse, but it shares that sometimes it is so hard to be gentle and calm, but it does most of the time make the situation better.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so why do you think gentleness is not our first or normal response? Like I have reasons for me why I have to be very intentional about it, but
I don't know. You're going to get into my psychology and sociology background, just how we're taught and the way we're wired and things like that. But I think, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, for me, and I've shared this in videos before, I and some of my family, we have what we refer to as a very strong sense of justice. I know that you have some people in your family with a very strong sense of justice.
100%.
And we want to see the world as we kind of think it should be. Now, interestingly, when we're preaching about God and Jesus talking about the kingdom of God, rather, when we think about the world as it should be, it doesn't always align. What the world should look like in the kingdom of God may not always align with what it looks like in my world. And so, also, I don't know that Jesus always responds with gentleness, but he doesn't usually respond with vitriol.
No.
There's usually
There's frustration.
He asks questions, but I just think we're challenged as human beings. We want to be right.
Why does that?
We're in such a polarized place. That's what the world has told us. It's my way or not.
Yeah. I think there's part of that, but why even just in the basic interaction? Why do we have to be angry to show that we're right? Why do we have to be angry to prove that someone's wrong? We're not going to solve these answers here today, but I am curious why we can't come into a conversation level-headed, calm, collected. I don't know. I feel like I've read about somebody who used to enter in conversations like that. And it's generally right. So what taught us? Maybe these other guys that were blind and couldn't see? I don't know.
Well, it's interesting when we chase after the wrong things in life,
100%. We're convincing ourselves that we're right. Maybe we're not angry at the other person. Maybe we're angry at ourselves. I don't know. That's a whole nother discussion, folks. But
it is. I mean,
That is
I love to
100%
watch.
right.
We have 2 boys in our house, right? Teenagers. And so there's a lot of ESPN, a lot of the Golf Channel on
What?
in our house. Yeah, I know.
No, I'm
Shocking.
surprised.
And I love watching sports and I love watching sports news. But sometimes some of the shows, I'm like, do we have to be arguing all the time? Like, not everything has to be an argument, does it?
They market it that way. What's that one with Shannon Sharp? And
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's like constant arguing on
They
that one.
actually marketed when that show first began a few years back. Come watch this because you're going to see us get angry at each other. We don't like each other. They really like each other. But come watch this so you can watch us argue. Pat McAfee's standing up there screaming from his desk because the camera's so far away anyways, but he does it to project his voice anyway.
Yeah. That stuff.
Creates all sorts of conflict.
Listen, people love it and
People
watch
eat it up.
And turn on any news channel, pick your poison there, right? Doesn't matter what political affiliation. There's a channel that's going to have people arguing on it. And that's what we watch. And so I think when we consume that, we start to think that, well, I'm entitled then to behave like that in the world.
That's how I get justice.
Yeah. Like I get justice by making sure you're wrong.
I scream the loudest.
And I'm right. Yeah. So, all right. So Proverbs has a lot to teach us, both about vegetables and also about, a gentle answer here today. So I love the book of Proverbs. It's just, there are some funny ones in there. Just funny ones in there. All right. Day 67. So in day 67, we looked at John 10, verses 1 through 21, Exodus 4, 1 Chronicles 11, Psalm 23, and Psalm 65. So in John chapter 10 here, we actually are talking about the I am statements of Jesus. And, I don't want to spend a ton of time here unless you've got a lot of notes in your journal,
I always do.
because we're actually preaching about these in a few
So we're
weeks.
going to leave it.
And there is a great chapter in the Message of Jesus about this. And we also did, I think it was maybe 2 years ago, we did a study here at Jerome Church. And sadly, I forget the name of it right now. But it was on Amplify Media, and
Oh.
it was all about, it's all right.
Well, it's time to pray.
It is time to pray.
So, should we pray?
Let's pray. Let's go for it.
God, all glory to you, who is able to do abundantly more than we can ever ask or imagine. Use your power at work within us to guide Jerome Church to live out your mission of loving you, loving people, and making world-changing disciples of Jesus. Amen.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
I have mine on my lock screen, and so sadly, I didn't trust myself to have it memorized today. I would have joined you otherwise. I know it. I probably could have done it, but we were laughing at lunch that I'm always afraid when I need to lead the Lord's Prayer during worship, as I don't usually have it written, and I've said it so many times in my life. And I'm like, I'm gonna get this wrong. And that was where I was just now. I was like, I'm gonna get this prayer wrong. It would look really bad.
No, that's all good.
So I
Well, what
didn't.
if I said the wrong name or
Yeah,
wrong
it
word? Then
would've
who's
been-
right, who's wrong?
Yeah,
You
that's
know
right,
what I mean?
right.
All good.
Thank you for praying for us
You're
there
welcome.
in that pause. But anyhow, we did this study on the I am statements of Jesus, and I'll put a link to that. So if you actually want to go do a whole study on it, I actually still have some books in our resources. You can come grab that. It was a really cool study looking at the symbolism and what all of those mean. But John is all about imagery, making sure we know who Jesus is, that Jesus is God, Jesus equals God, and why Jesus came, which was for our salvation and to give us life. So, any additional thoughts? I mean, any short additional thoughts there
I
on the I am
know.
statements of John?
No, I mean, other than as sheep will recognize our shepherd, right?
Mhm.
Don't just leave it at that.
Yeah, well, that's a good tie-in to where we're headed in Psalm 23. So we'll get there. We are here moving backward in Exodus again, which is a little bit, again, frustrating for me. And now we actually figure out how Moses actually got back there. His older brother Aaron came to get him. This one made me laugh. We talked about this at lunch today. It's an interesting brother relationship. Throughout their story, Aaron always kind of spoke for Moses. And in our household, we have 2 boys, and yours you have 3. And my guess is, if your household is at all like mine, the older brother, in whatever circumstance, usually tends to speak for the younger,
Absolutely.
wherever they are. So, Moses uses this kind of as like an excuse quite a few times. Oh, God, I can't do that. I don't speak very well. And God's like, fine, then let Aaron talk for you. But you're still going to lead, and he finds a way to do it. And
Yeah.
so, anyway, their relationship is super interesting because Aaron is an interesting character to me because he's the one, of course, that, makes the golden calf while Moses is up on the mountain with God. But then he also then is literally the father of the priests, of the priesthood.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just, Aaron's an interesting character.
Yep.
In Exodus 4:24, we have this kind of weirdo verse that
That one has always been weird for me too. So I'm really glad
you're glad somebody asked a
somebody
question
asked
on
this
it?
question.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. And it says this, at a lodging place on the way, the Lord met Moses and was about to kill him. And it kind of comes out of nowhere because God has just asked Moses to come back and free his people. And now you're like, hey, hold on. And so we have a participant who asks, well, why did God want to kill Moses? So before we dig into what I found here, did you have any thoughts on this at all?
No.
Yeah.
Not here.
I honestly didn't either. I had to look it up because I, like you, have always kind of noted that and gone, that's weird. Well, we know he doesn't die, so you skip over.
Yeah, I already know this part, so it's good.
And so God, he tells Moses to go back and save his people. And so then we've got this kind of weirdness, like I said. And so as I was Googling it in the absence of, Pastor Bruce, I turned to one of our trusted resources we've shared on here, which is a Bible Project, and found a podcast episode that they did. So different from their videos.
Okay.
And they kind of walk us through, and I'm going to put the link to that in the video notes today. So if you want to go watch that, listen to that, you can do that. But in chapters 1 through 4, is that, Moses is actually living out, and I hadn't thought about this, what is going to happen to all of the people. So, like, he was sent away, he spent some time in the wilderness, right? Then
Yeah.
there's deliverance. And so they kind of walk through that. And in many ways, I believe it's like a foreshadowing where it is reflecting on his kind of complex identity. Is he Hebrew or is he an Egyptian?
Yes.
Because,
Yes.
he is a Hebrew, but he was raised as an Egyptian.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we ultimately see that what Moses fails to do here is surrender fully to the will of God. And in fact, it's actually his wife who saves his life
Mm-hmm.
by the act of circumcising, we believe, their son, is how the story goes. And so his wife does that. And this podcast kind of goes on to say it was really because the reason God said, I'm going to kill, the Lord met Moses and was about to kill him, I believe was because Moses really wasn't upholding God's covenant that was made with Abraham, made with the Hebrew people, made with the Israelites. And
Okay.
so Moses was sort of saying, like, I'm going to cast off that part of my identity.
Mhm.
I don't really have to follow your rules, God. And it may have been one of those things, God saying, I've called you. You are my people. You are now going to lead my people out of Egypt. And you're still choosing not to follow this covenant. It's an interesting thing where we can see, where there is consequence when we choose not to align ourselves with God's expectations, God's will.
Yeah.
We don't have to like it,
Yeah.
but we have to wrestle with it some.
Absolutely.
No, I will warn you. The Bible Project podcast link, it goes pretty in depth with an explanation of circumcision and like why it became a thing and why this was even a problem and why that would be the reason that God would want to kill Moses. So be prepared for that, I suppose. But if you want to get an interesting side note to this one little weird verse that I think a lot of us struggle with, it's a great place to do that. So did I answer it enough for you there?
Yes, that's enough there.
Okay, it's
Now I
enough
just
there.
want to dive into more of the covenant. I think I just need to watch the podcast.
Yeah. It's a good one. I really like the Bible Project guys too. They're fun to listen to. And when we get into First Chronicles, now we've jumped ahead. Now David, goes. Now he's king. And when we jump around like this, just a couple of days later, it happened really fast, but it was not true in the real life timeline. David had a lot of stuff he had to go through between the anointing and actually becoming king. There was a lot. Probably, when we talk about waiting God's timing,
Yep.
there's a lot of that there. So then we see Psalm 23, which in many ways connects to all of these other readings today, as they do in this plan. And Psalm 23 is attributed to David and believed to have been written during his reign as king of Israel. But interestingly, in our faith tradition and Christianity, we mostly just hear it at funerals and in the King James Version. That's my experience with Psalm 23. Do you have any different experience there?
No, I was just thinking about a song.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There is a good song right now. And so one of the things, though, that does stick out to me when I've read it not at funerals and not in the King James
And
Version,
not in movies.
usually, not in movies, is the sort of question about being made to lie down. Right? I think we think about the valley of the shadow of death. We get to
Yeah.
that piece a lot. But we think about this part, he makes me lie down in green pastures. It's not like, oh, have a nice nap. It's like, no. Like you go here.
Yeah, I have to lay down
Make
right
you
now.
lie
Yeah.
down, right? And so that's when this always kind of stopped me in my tracks in moments when I have a tendency to just like go. And then God will sometimes put a stop to things, either for a variety of reasons, whatever that might be. So my question for you is, God ever made you lie down, hopefully in green pastures?
Yes.
Yeah.
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 There's been moments where he's made me slow down.
Yeah.
Especially of what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. Trying to
Right.
get some margin in our lives.
Trying to get some margin in our lives,
Yeah.
but also like when I get really stressed out or really anxious, I got to go. And I have to clean and I have to fix and I have to do all these things. And so sometimes God like specifically when I hurt my back.
Oh, yes.
I had to
Yes.
lay down.
Yes. Another thing you and Rob have very much in common, right? Is and that's difficult. I mean, when you're young and you've got young kids and you want to be out doing the things with them. I know that was a tough time for you and your family.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
glad your back is much
Gives you
better
a
these
lot more
days.
appreciation, a lot more love for God, and it really changed a lot of things. And I think he was saying you need to lay down because I was doing way too much. I was way too busy.
Yeah.
So
Thank you for sharing that. That's
yeah,
a good one. So anyway, just some things to think about Psalm 23. Take it out of the context you're maybe used to hearing it in. Read it in new ways. Focus on some different verses. That would be my encouragement to you there.
and look at that song.
Yeah, look at that
It's a good
song.
one.
Yeah. All right. So day 68, we've got Luke 10, Deuteronomy 6, Leviticus 21, and Job 40. This was one I confess I've skipped over, apparently, because it just didn't seem that familiar to me, where Jesus sends out the 72.
Which the 72 is unique
Yeah,
to Luke.
yeah. Is it?
Yes, it
I
is.
didn't, okay, tell me about it. I
I
didn't look
didn't
that
watch
much
the
up.
Bible
Yeah,
project of it,
yeah,
but check it out. It's unique.
yeah, okay.
And there's I have it flagged. I should go back, circle back around and watch it. It's in my notes that I need to, but I did find that was in there that Jesus sends out his disciples. Luke mentioned 72 disciples, and no other account has so far.
Right. And he interestingly does it 2 by 2,
2 by 2.
right? Ahead to every town he's about to go. And he sends them with nothing on purpose,
Nothing. 100%.
to see how hospitable these places are. And so it's like an advance party, and it's interesting. I mean, my guess is as we get into the later parts, we can definitely see some models of ministry. I mean, we've already talked about Jesus's ministry of multiplication and how this wasn't just Jesus by himself doing this. And we as disciples should recognize that we can't just do this alone. This isn't just like one of us, out there. So we also, gosh, a lot in Luke 10. I think this is probably why I skip over the 72, to be fair, is because we go now into the parable of the Good Samaritan.
We do.
We get the story of Martha and Mary, one that I love. I've actually preached on it here in past, and lots of other familiar narratives. And so the 72 has probably just sort of felt like a skip over for me, if I'm being honest. But now I'm curious to go and look at it more.
Yeah, I think this journey has made me kind of pay attention to it more because that's not the first time and the only time that we read that story about his
Right.
sending out his disciples. But all of a sudden I'm like, 72?
Yeah,
I didn't know.
yeah. That's a
I
lot
know
of
he had them
people.
labeled here, and that is a lot, right? Where he just sends out his disciples. So you're thinking like, okay, like 12.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah.
You know what I mean? And all of a sudden 72, and he's got all these folks that he's able to send out. And I don't know, when I read it too, I kind of look at it as some rules, like this is how you need to go and disciple and who you need to stay with and how they need to accept you and all this kind of stuff. And I start to see this. You don't normally see all these rules listed out a little
Right.
bit.
You're right. I'd be curious to compare that to what we see in the early church, like in the book of Acts, because,
Yes.
traditionally Acts was written by the same author as the Gospel of Luke. It's sort of like a continuation of Luke.
Okay.
And so I now need to, I think, go pay more attention to that.
Let's do
That's
that.
something we're going to do. So you've hit a Bible nerd nerve for
There you
me on
go.
that one. I'll
Love
have to figure that out. Okay, Deuteronomy, we find here in chapter 6, verse 5, the greatest command, which Jesus later quotes, in the New Testament, where he talks about when he's asked by the Pharisees, what is the greatest commandment? This is where he quotes it from. So to me, in many ways, it's just a reminder that Jesus knew his scripture. And you didn't want to challenge Jesus on it. And the Pharisees, I think it was actually might have been in this week, where they say, how do you know all of this when we know that you haven't been in the temple learning it? And Jesus says, my education doesn't come from you all. It comes from God the Father. And so, but he knows scriptures in and out. He was a good Hebrew boy. He knew everything, backwards and forwards. So anyway, we get to Leviticus now. We've got rules for priests. I just, my note here was, remember they're descendants of Aaron. when we ever look at the priests doing something weird or screwing something up, I have to remember, old Aaron and poor guy and the golden calf, and be like, at the end of the day, they weren't perfect either.
They were
They
not.
were just set
None of us are.
aside.
Yeah.
They were set apart. They
Yeah.
weren't more holy necessarily, just set apart for that little piece here. So as we turn the page on this day, literally in our notes here, turn the page, somebody had a question about behemoth that was mentioned in the book of Job, in our reading from Job today. And so this participant says, I'd like to know more about behemoth and what it is said to be. I have to confess, I had to turn to Google for this one. And so this is just straight out of the Googles. Okay. In the book of Job, chapter 40, well, this part is not, this is out of the Bible. But in the book of Job, chapter 40, the behemoth is like this powerful, large, grass-eating creature. And it's described as having a lot of strength, with bones like bronze and limbs like iron. Sounds terrifying,
Okay.
honestly.
Yeah.
And it's often, and this is what Google had to say to me, but it's often interpreted as a reference to a hippopotamus due to its river-dwelling nature and large mouth, though some scholars speculate it could represent a mythical beast or even a dinosaur. Whatever,
Yes.
okay? Which, based on the descriptions provided in the text. I suppose if you're a biblical literalist and you think the earth is only so many years old, then it could be a dinosaur. No, I'm just not calling out.
I mean,
That's
aren't alligators like connected to dinosaurs?
Right.
Maybe it's an alligator.
Yeah, and so while commonly associated with the hippopotamus, some other scholars suggest that the behemoth could also represent an elephant, which, bones like bronze, bones like iron, that doesn't really feel like an elephant. The one I'm going with is water buffalo. That was another thing. Have you seen a water
Well, yeah,
buffalo?
why can't I think about what a water buffalo looks like?
Well, I mean, so
Like a buffalo, but in the water? Like,
they're like giant cow things. I mean, like, they're huge.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
Like, they're of the bovine family.
Okay.
Okay. And I've recently seen a reel. It's hard to know what's real anymore because of
'Cause
the
the
AI
reels.
and everything. But
Yeah.
this looked real,
Okay.
and it was terrifying. I learned that they're domesticated in many places, and their milk is used to make Italian mozzarella cheese. That's a fun fact. So you may have not knowingly had water buffalo milk, but
Okay.
it was terrifying, and terrifying because they're enormous. So they can get up to, and here are some fun facts, 2,650 pounds. They can be 8 to 9
Wow.
feet long, 6 feet tall, and their horns can get up to 5 feet long. But the scarier part is that they can run up to 30 miles per hour,
Oh, jeez.
which is faster than when Michael Scott in The Office tried to outrun the speed thing. Remember?
Yes, I do.
know?
Out on the road, yeah.
And
But the car did, and he thought that he ran that
Correct.
fast.
Yeah.
Okay, just as a recap.
Yeah,
There we
it's
go.
a quick recap. But they can also hold their breath. This is the scariest part. They can hold their breath underwater for up to 5 minutes. So the video I saw was this water buffalo fully submerged,
Mhm.
just walking in like a river. And you could just, I guess, just have your boat, go right on top. You could be swimming in there, and there's this giant thing. So I don't know.
Wow. And
yeah.
how long again can they hold their breath? And they're down there?
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Yeah. So and
So
they're
you go up to the swimming hole. You think you're all clear.
yeah.
And within the first 5 minutes, you're already in the water, having fun, whatever.
Right,
And
right.
then all of a sudden, the water buffalo is on you.
Correct. I mean, doesn't that seem scary? And so the reality is we don't actually know what this behemoth
No.
was.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any way that we find out, but for me, it will now forever be a terrifying water buffalo.
Large
So,
animal.
Large animal.
Large animal.
World's
I mean,
largest
that's-
bovine.
Right, like huge.
Yeah.
Is what it was. That's what the behemoth was.
Correct. So real, mythical,
Yeah.
who knows?
No.
Another participant here noted that the land of milk and honey appears roughly 20 times in the Old Testament, mostly in relation to the Promised Land as an expression of agricultural prosperity. My side note trying to be funny here was, apparently it was lots of water buffalo milk. But it
That was good.
That's good. Thanks. I appreciate one laugh out of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's a great call out. It's something that we, kind of almost sounds cliche,
Mhm.
but they use it a lot and it had real meaning there.
Yeah.
That it meant there was food to eat.
Mhm.
There, was enough because for the cattle to be able to produce milk or animals of whatever to be able to produce milk, there had to be enough food for them to eat.
Mhm.
And so, for honey, how do you get honey? Well, there had to be flora for
Yeah.
that, right? There has to be stuff growing for these things to happen.
Yeah.
And so it couldn't happen in the middle of the wilderness. Couldn't
Mm.
happen in the middle of the desert.
Yeah, exactly. Mhm.
So, it's a cool thing there. All right, let's move into day 69. We've got John chapter 10, verses 22 to 42, Psalm 82, Leviticus 24, and 1 Kings 7. Ah, poor Jesus here. They still don't believe him. The
Mhm.
Jewish opponents try to kill him. He somehow escapes their grasp.
Escapes it again.
I'm not a huge Star Wars fan, but I'm going to recognize, I think this is the second time in maybe 2 or 3 weeks that I'm now going to mention it. So apparently it's at least enough of my pop culture knowledge. But is Jesus escaping stormtroopers here? When they shoot at people in Star Wars?
I
And
don't.
it's like pew pew and no, like they never hit anyone. And
Yeah.
Jesus is just like, well, somehow he escaped. I mean, I'm okay with understanding he's the son of God. I get it.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
supernaturalness there. But I actually kind of want to know how he continues to escape. Like, were they really after him? Did God simply spare him? Or is this like a dressed up story to build us up as, the supernatural part of Jesus?
Or did he just simply slip out of the back?
Yeah, but I mean, like, were they just terrible at this? Or were they trying to be covert and getting him?
Correct. Were they truly like, maybe he's in a crowd and you see the bad guys in the back looking over the crowd and he just turns away and walks away? Or to your other point, is he actively being chased, high speed chase here, and he just slips out of their grasp? I don't know.
Or is it good storytelling?
Good
in the
storytelling?
Gospel of John, wanting to
Oh,
extend the storyline longer. I'm not trying to question the Bible, but there are many times where he's like, and he just slipped out. I think it was wasn't it maybe in the Gospel of Luke, where when Jesus is preaching in his hometown and they take him to the edge of a cliff to throw him off, and then he just turns around and walks back through the crowd. Just like, nah, I'm good. I'm not gonna go off the cliff today. And so, there are multiple times Jesus is sort of, James Bondish in that way. He just kind of seems to slip out of trouble.
I've always taken it the way you were talking about before, just son of God. Like,
Yeah. And I
you know what I mean?
I
Like,
think the writer of John, that's probably definitely how they want us to take it.
is how it's
Yeah,
intended,
yeah.
100%. And then I think that's just where my brain's always taken me is like, of course he escaped it. He clearly says it's not his time.
Right. Right. And I don't doubt that, but I always do just kind
But
of wonder about the humanity
how is
piece of it.
he? Yeah, 100%. When you actually connect it, like, how is he getting away?
I just want some details.
Some more details would be great. Yeah.
Some more details.
He opened the back door. He ran this way and something. I don't know.
I mean, like, did he have
he
some
had
moves,
to,
some
he had to
jujitsu
karate
moves?
his way out.
I just want to know.
What is that move from the Karate Kid? The
Oh yeah, I know what
you
you're
know
talking
what I mean,
about,
the
but I don't.
flamingo or praying mantis or I don't know.
I don't know. It's not the flamingo. I can tell you that was
That looks like
certainty.
a flamingo.
I can-
I don't know.
I can tell you that with certainty. Those who are fans would are at us right now. Not the flamingo though.
Yeah, and I gotta be no. I don't know if I should admit it. I don't know that I actually watched the Karate Kid all the way through. Watch pieces of it.
Okay,
But I
but
don't
have you
watch.
watched the new Cobra Kai series?
Not even a second of it.
I would highly recommend
Yeah?
sometime when you've got spare time,
Yeah.
watch through the Karate Kid series and then go watch the Cobra Kai series. It's super entertaining. So many good callbacks.
Really?
You're a little young for it. Let's
I
be
may have just
honest.
missed it because the Karate Kid was never big during
No, I mean, it was
my-
big. I was born in 1981. It was big.
I was
you know.
born
I know
sometime
you were,
after
I
that.
know you were born after that. I'm aware. I mean, where you were born after that. Um, but yes,
Made
it's
my day.
uh But no, I mean that has literally nothing to do with the Bible.
Oh,
But
no, sorry about that.
definitely encourage Cobra Kai. I actually have a sticker on the back of my computer if you want to zoom in and
That'd
look
be
at it. I do Miyagi Do all the way. Um, okay, and so with that, we're gonna move to First Kings. Here, Solomon builds his palace. Interestingly, it is the same one that Jesus walks through in our reading from John chapter 10. So he's actually walking through the colonnades when his opponents try to kill him. I'm going to put in the links to this video. The Met has a website. They actually have a 19th century architectural model of the temple. Now, it's based on these writings, so I don't think it's based on a drawing per
Yeah.
se. It's based on biblical interpretation. So it's one person's interpretation of that. But this is a really cool little link, and I would really encourage you to click on it because it gives you the model, but then they also have zoomed in with tiny little cameras. So it's like you're inside the model and what it
Yeah.
would be like to be in this temple. And I really enjoyed taking a look at
I'll have
that.
to take a
So
look at
there's
that.
a video on there.
Nice.
Go check that out. All right, we wrapped up. Oof, we're getting there. We wrapped up day 70, and it really sums up the week with a command from Deuteronomy 6:5, which, is this that Jesus says later on when he quotes it, but love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. And I think,
Another great song.
yeah, and I believe that it really does sum up where we've been in this week's readings. It's been interesting to me how each week kind of has a theme. Whether, I haven't always called them out, but they all kind of feel the same sometimes.
So, but I think, and I'm sure we're over on time, but just to connect this. So, when you said to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, are you saying that maybe we should let him take the wheel and stop fighting him? If we could circle back to the beginning here,
Yeah, with all of it,
all of it,
right? Yeah, so
disengage cruise control, let
the
him take over.
absolutely.
Yeah.
This week when yeah, your wife Tara preached for us on Student Ministry Sunday, did an incredible job.
No, yes, she did.
One of the things that stuck with me when she talked about how Jesus teaches us to be salt and light is that he doesn't suggest that it's something we should be or that it's something we can be. He says, you are salt and light.
Yeah.
And I think when we look at commands,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes today, to your point, we think they're optional. And that's not how a command works.
Mm-hmm.
And because in our culture today, for the most part, we're not used to taking just a command. You tell me to do this, and I'm like, yes, sir. That's really not how we typically operate unless
Yeah.
you're, say, for example, in the military, and then you best operate that way.
Mm-hmm.
But, this is a command. Love the Lord your God with
Mhm.
all your heart, not
Yep.
with some of it, with all your soul, not with just the part that feels easy, with all your strength, with everything you have. And I think, yes. Are we supposed to do that? Uh-huh. Would it solve some problems if we actually would? Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing with commands, it also leads you to actively seek to do that thing. And I think that this week we can actively seek to do that. What do you think? This week and forever, but
I like where you're going. I like where you're going. All right, so let's actually look ahead to this next week here. We're gonna look ahead just for a moment at the next week's readings.
or my
Uh,
last week, but that's fine.
Or you're right. You've already been there. If you want to give us some pointers,
No,
tell
no,
us where
no,
we're
no,
going.
no, no.
But we want to give you some tools and encouragement for the next 7 days of reading. These are going to feel familiar to you. I think at this point, we have spent some time in most of these books. We're going to be in the Gospel of Luke. We're going to be back in the Psalms. I don't think we're quite to the end of Job because we've really been jumping around in there, but I feel like we got to be getting close. I feel like we've had a lot of Job.
A lot of Job.
We're going to be in Jeremiah, in Second Chronicles, in Isaiah, in Ezekiel, in Genesis, which means in those, when you get, things like Second Chronicles in Genesis, you're going to have a lot of really important stories that are going to set up the other parts of your New Testament readings primarily.
100%.
So pay attention to those. I'll be back in the Proverbs. Would love to hear if you've got fortune cookie type verse that stuck out to you. Make sure you put a comment in the Talk It Over. I kind of get a little giggle sometimes out of the Proverbs. I enjoy them. But they're important. I think wisdom literature is it's an odd that we're not used to it. And so that's part of the reason why it seems kind of weird. But we're back in Jonah, and then you've got some more in Ezra, Ecclesiastes, and back in the Gospel of John. So any little notes you've got for us on your week ahead?
No. I got to tell you, in some of those kind of Old Testament stories, and I think we've talked about this before, at least I know Rob and I have, there are times when I find myself just going to the Message, right? And I read them both. So there is some double reading in there, but I think it just, whatever it takes for you to just kind of digest what's being said. I know you use the Bible Project a lot.
It depends on your learning style.
Depends on your learning style,
Yeah.
right? And the study notes that are in YouVersion are always great. And
Yes. Yeah.
so
Dig in. And to your point, I think you made the suggestion earlier. If you are finding a particular book, for example, let's say you really like the book of Ezra. If you're finding that really interesting, I would encourage you to go in the YouVersion app and find a plan that's just for Ezra, even if you just kind of save it for later
yeah,
so you can go back to it and
save
reference
it,
it.
right?
There are no rules here. The thing that we're trying to get to is to
Mhm.
make studying the Bible a regular daily habit, part of your life, and to be in God's word every day. And so just find different ways to explore that, do a book study, do a word study, figure it out. But there's some good ones in there
Yeah.
and ones that, I think without a plan like this, I'm not like running to the book of Ezra every day.
No.
Ecclesiastes isn't what I use as my bedtime reading most of the
I don't know
time.
if this is bad to admit, but Proverbs isn't one I would run to.
No, actually isn't for me either.
Okay.
No, like I said, I find it, I kind of find it funny.
Yeah.
I mean, some of it I'm always like, this is in the Bible? This is kind of weird,
It is.
But
Yeah.
I like that it's there and it's there for a reason and it helps us understand it and all. No, Proverbs is not like on my, it's not the one I spend a lot of time in.
Yeah.
To be fair.
Yeah.
But all right, so we want to give you encouragement to stick with it. We would love to hear from you. If you want to make comments on the video, we'll respond to those. You can email us. That's all in the video notes for today. Wherever you are in the plan, I want to encourage you to catch up if you need to. And if you're behind, just jump in where you are. It really is okay. And share the comments and discussion with the group. I love the Talk It Over section. When I do. When there are sometimes we've had big days in there, and there's like nothing that makes me happier when I see people with questions and really getting into it.
100%. I just wrestle with the questions.
It's okay.
And then I ask you or someone else later. Anyways,
That's what we want.
quick. I don't know if we're late enough in the year, but you got me thinking about this catch-up thing. If people start right now, can they circle back around at the tail, like
Absolutely.
into next year if need be
Yes.
to finish?
Absolutely.
And all of our
yes.
notes will still be sitting in there, right?
Yes.
So that's
This-
another option now. Just jump in.
Yeah,
Right.
this plan isn't going to go away. I mean,
Right.
I do think that this has gone so well this year that we will probably be looking at a different plan for 2026. As we're thinking ahead, we'll still be reading through the Bible in a year, but maybe in a different way this time. Maybe we'll do a chronological plan or something
Yeah.
else. And
Yeah.
so, but yes, by all means, get in a habit of reading the Bible. And the cool thing about this plan is, yeah, you kind of can jump in right now and still get something out of every day's reading.
100%.
Yeah, and I
Yes.
believe that about the Bible in general. You could jump in on any day, anywhere, and God's going to have a word for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of the fascinating thing. God will speak through in new ways, maybe in verses you've
Well-
read or skipped over a million times.
And that's okay because honestly, in this plan, some of the readings that we do, we are jumping into part of the story already.
We are. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You are
well,
missing, especially we talked about Exodus, right? Like,
Yes.
Like,
Yes. That's
so
one. You haven't missed much.
join
Jump in-
us. Jump right in.
If
We're
you're
having fun.
jumping in today.
Yeah.
What's weird about the Exodus one for me is when you do a typical read through the Bible in a year and you start with Genesis and you get to Exodus, we would have been like long gone, long done with
Mhm.
Exodus by now. And so I do like that it's still in our
Keeping it fresh.
discussion and keeping it fresh, but
Yeah.
I wish they would at least have gone through it chronologically. But whatever, beggars can't be choosers on this
Yeah.
one, I
Yeah.
guess. So, well, friends, anyway, thank you for watching and for learning together with us today. Hope you've enjoyed our discussion. Eric, I really enjoyed having you on here.
Hey, anytime. Hopefully I
Um,
didn't, make it so I can't come back or anything like
No,
that. Big
and
love.
we don't
Yeah.
worry about time. We put those time markers in there. If you watch the whole thing, thank you for sticking with us.
Yes.
If you've jumped ahead and you missed this part, well, shame on you. I'm just kidding. But we do. We want to help you really to just remember to keep at it. Reading the Bible is a discipline and it takes practice. It's not going to happen by accident. Going to have to be intentional about
Absolutely.
it. So I'm Sarah and
I'm Eric.
yep, still Eric. I want to thank you for joining us and have another blessed week in the Bible.